So we're calling the meeting to order at 5:40.
Yep.
Roll call, Scott Trotter, Chair is absent. Vice Chair Cindy Young, present. Rich Johnson, present. And we have a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have no public, so there will be no public comment. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
For the agenda?
Second it? So moved.
Yep.
Can we get a motion to approve the January 15, 2026 reorg meeting minutes?
So moved.
Second it? Approved. Steve? Can we
Yeah.
get the township report, please?
Yes. So I wanted to take just a few moments and kind of let you know where we are, what we've been doing over the last really about 4 or 5 months and kind of where we're headed. So in February, Tom left the township, and at that point, we still had outstanding 2 years worth of library audits, 3 years worth of municipal authority audits, and 3 years worth of township audits. We focused initially, came up with a plan of how we were going to tackle that. What the board authorized me to do was to go out and hire, well, not hire, but engage and contract with 2 different groups. I engaged with a group that's actually provides services to school districts, but one of their folks was a very talented finance person who had done a lot of school district work, and there's a lot of similarity to school district work to township work. And she has a very good working relationship with our auditor. And so it made sense to bring somebody in that knew our auditor and also kind of had a pretty good understanding of what it is that we do. And she's functioning at a very high level, helping us to get that work done. And then we brought in a person from Robert Half, who was basically an accountant level position, who was helping us initially with both municipal authority, helping us initially with library and municipal authority and township. The municipal authority then authorized us to bring in a second person from Robert Half. And if you don't know who Robert Half is an accounting staffing agency. They're primary, they work on placing people full-time and permanently, but they also have temp type positions, and that's what we work through. Many moons ago, I actually was a Robert and Half temp that went to the city of Kansas City, and that was my first foray into local government work 20 plus years ago. What I would say there is that we brought that person in. The municipal authority initially authorized 1 month. They then authorized a second month. And so we kept that person on for 2 months and then we still have the one on currently from Robert Half. What I will tell you is what we've gotten accomplished is we've completed both the 2 outstanding library audits, both 24 and 25. And both of those audits went relatively easily. They're pretty clean. They're pretty straightforward. We are just kind of letting you know we're kind of at about, we're up to date through March of the library books. I need to get updated for April and May. And so there was actually I found out that there was one of our bank statements that didn't come in. And so I got to get that bank statement, get that reconciled, which we'll take care of and do that. The municipal authority, we've been able to complete 23, 24, and 25. Well, let me back up. We've completed 23 and 24. The auditor actually presented to the municipal authority Monday night, the 24 audit. We submitted the 25 audit. I got drafts back today from the 25 audit. I haven't even had a chance to look at them. My intent is to look at those. Jackie's looked at them briefly. I think there's a couple things that I have to sign off on. And once I do that, those audits will go and go through their final side that they do. And that usually takes another week or two. So I see the 25 municipal authority audit being done probably by the beginning of July timeframe is what my guess is. Maybe a little later, depending on what the auditor's schedule is, but it's all of the work that they need us to do is done. We have completed the 23 township audit, and we are actively working on 24 and 25. We are running into a few challenges just with the software itself. The software is a government design software, and under normal circumstances, it does pretty well. There was a couple challenges. One, I found out that the software had not been updated for 2 years. And so we did an update in the middle of all of this, which kind of impacted where we were. We're working through that. It may or may not have caused a couple issues with how some things posted. And so we're going back through and verifying everything, mostly on the accounts receivable side. And we hope to get through that in the next couple of weeks and get the 2024 audit complete. And then we'll jump into the 2025. What we found is that when we got the 24 municipal authority audit done, we had already done a fair amount on the 25 because we were working on both. Like as we were making adjustments, we were able to do it in both years if they needed to be done and those kind of things. So that's kind of where we are with the audits. And I've been giving overview type of reporting to the township. I gave a formal up-to-date report to the municipal authority on Monday night through the month of April. We've, like I said, we've started doing reporting for the library. So I'm glad to answer any questions that you have, any concerns you might want to bring up. I'd be glad to address those before we go any further.
So currently there's still nobody in place.
Yeah, that's a great question. Because of what we did with bringing in temporary folks, I told the board I didn't want to really start looking for a replacement until we were in a spot where we were pretty sure that we were going to be up to date on everything when I brought somebody in. The idea being I didn't want to bring somebody in and say, oh, here, and this is what you have to do and get, want to set the person up for success, not set them up for failure in my thought. And so that's kind of where we are with that. I did get approval to go out and start the advertising process. I've yet to place that ad. I have asked the board to review 2 options that I put forward as potential for the way we would go forward with the finances. And so hopefully I'll hear back something pretty soon on that and which way they'd like to go. And just need a little bit of feedback of what that would look like. One of the things that we know is that in today's environment, finding a true finance director for a municipality is a very, very difficult challenge. And the reason for that is kind of twofold. One is that there's not a lot of graduates going into governmental accounting, and those that are going into governmental accounting are going straight to the CPA firms because 2 reasons. One is they get, if they need their time at a CPA firm, it gets their experience. As they get their experience, they kind of stay with the CPA firm because by the time they get their experience, they're making more than what most municipalities are paying for a finance director position. If you were to take that same position and go out and go to work at a for-profit organization, you're probably making at least double, maybe even more than double to do it. So people, it's just a challenge that we have, and it's not a challenge of new towns, it's a challenge across the board. The other thing that is the other challenge with it is that a lot of the finance people that were out and doing this were, I'm going to say this and I'm going to date myself, that were my age, and many of them are retiring and leaving the profession at this point. And so you have this big, like, open door where people are going out and a very small number of people are coming in. It's actually a very true statement even for managers at this point. It's a little bit better with managers because you can have a manager that kind of comes in with a variety of backgrounds, but we're finding it harder and harder to find folks with the finance background. So
the consultants will stay on to do the day-to-day work.
So what we're going to do is the board has approved at their last meeting that we would maintain the Robert Half person up until 30 days after we have hired the new person, just so we can make sure we stay on top of everything that we need to be on top of. And so that when the new person comes in, hopefully we hand them over books that are, one, all totally up to date, and two, everything is, they're going to have to still come in and jump in and get busy quickly, but we think that 30 days with somebody will help kind of have a good transition. We're going to maintain our relationship with the other person who's kind of our finance consultant, probably through at least the end of the year, and maybe even through at least getting the audit done for 2026, just to make sure we've covered everything. And she's got a very good understanding of all the things that we need to look at for the audit. So that way, when whoever we bring in, we can go through and they would have experienced hopefully a full cycle of everything by the time we let everything go. Any other questions?
Are there any deadlines for the audits to be completed by?
Yeah, there's deadlines that we drastically missed for 23, 24. So usually you have to file with DCED a preliminary kind of report by the beginning of April of every year. And then usually by September is the time frame when you're trying to get everything finalized and having a formal audit done. I am hoping that we are able to have the 25 done by September. That's my goal. Hopefully really before that, but September would be the latest. And we would then be caught back up where we're supposed to be.
And how does this affect budgets for 2027?
For 2026, it doesn't impact necessarily the budget. It has obviously impacted how we're doing reporting because I don't want to report information that I don't know is totally accurate until I get these audits caught up. But I am reporting what I can. What I do know is accurate and straight with expenses and revenues, that kind of stuff I can do. But the total balances on some of the assets and things like that, that's not finalized yet from 24 and 25. So we're finalizing those. So that's how it's impacting 26, 27. I think we'll be fine. I'll have a really good understanding. Well, I'll have as good of understanding as one can have when we are middle of the year and we start budgeting for the next year in local government. One of the challenges, there's so many things that are out of our control for some of our revenues when it comes to permits and, some of those kind of things. They're not necessarily consistent. And so it's kind of hard to know what you're going to have. When Ellis Preserve was being built out, I asked kind of what the timeline was, and every year it changed, even after we kind of said, here's what we thought we were going to do. In most of the cases, it changed for the best for us in that more permits came in sooner. And so we actually ended up having more revenue than we anticipated, based on what they told us their schedule was going to be. And part of that was part of that was the COVID issue that came in. COVID really played havoc with these developers and knowing how quickly some of these stores were going to be ready to want to come in and move forward. And so that kind of messed with us a little bit there. And then secondly, we had the housing stock that was being built new and being sold in town was actually also selling much faster than what the developer had originally anticipated, which meant that the permits were being pulled faster and they were moving more quickly. So the good news for the township, right, in that play, but that means now when I anticipated some of those dollars coming in, we don't have those dollars now because they were earlier in the process. Any other questions? I think that can let me transition actually into the next section on the agenda, if that's okay with you. I'll just move right along. So the real reason for tonight's meeting is I know Cindy said something to me probably, I don't know, months ago, may have even been half a year ago at this point, about how we present the budget. And so what I have a copy for you, and we can put this on the agenda for people who want to see it later, but they're both on the website. I didn't, and I just grabbed two of them. I didn't grab any specific two. I grabbed the two that came up right away when I typed in budget, that had what I was looking for. The first one that if you look at this one for just a moment, this is the one that for the last, I think 3 years, maybe 4 years, we've used as our basis for passing the budget. And it's basically a line item budget. Not my favorite way to do budgeting, but it's been the way we've been able to do it based on the staffing that we've had. And so it is by fund. In the beginning, it kind of covers what changes have happened, and then we go through and run the numbers and then specifically get into the detail back in the budget for each department and then for each fund. And then there's also a sheet in there for each fund as to what the anticipated fund balance would be at the end of the budget year. So that meets all state requirements that we would have. And so we've used that the last, like I said, 3 or 4 years since Rich left. And Rich was our first finance director we had under me. And the second packet that I have for you that looks like this was the budget after we adopted it. So this was not what we put out to the public when we were going through the budget process. This is what the budget looked like after it was adopted. This was actually the GFOA, where we won the GFOA budget award. I think it was 3 years. And so during the process, it looked more like the one that you've seen like this, because it was more line items that we went through. And then this was more like the document that was a public document after we passed the budget. Somebody could go through and get really quite a bit of detail and things like that. So my purpose for us tonight, and not that I expect to get an answer tonight, but I wanted the thinking to start tonight. And I wanted us to start talking about what would be ideal as we start presenting the budget to not only the board, but also to the public, and saying, here's where we are, here's where we're going, here's what the expectations are. First of all, what I know is if I turn this budget over to the public and to the board and say, here's the budget that we want to pass, I'll be honest with you, I don't think most people are going to spend the time reading it, right? So and I don't know that I think it does a better job than this. Okay, no, this is just the line item. I think it does much better job than that. But I think there's like an in-between during the budget process that would be helpful for the public. My thoughts have always been, and we've just never gotten there, mostly because I don't have a lot of staff to go do these kind of things, but I'm hoping with the as we move forward between maybe what this committee can do and maybe what we can do with some folks who have said they'd be glad to help and volunteer, is maybe we can come up with something that really works a little bit better at telling the story. Because I believe that really the budget is a story of where we're headed and what we're trying to accomplish. But I would really like to hear, because you all are the ones that see it, and you all are the ones who, you know, kind of will be the ones that probably talk to your neighbors about it in a different way than I might be able to talk to about it with somebody. Was really trying to figure out what's the most important things that people need to see, and what would be the most helpful for folks, and what would that look like? You know, is it a summary of about 3 or 4 pages that tells the whole story of what's in the budget? Is it, you know, because there is a, you know, if when you look at this, there is kind of that summary page that, you know, kind of the, and I'm looking at this one when I say that. There's a summary page that goes through and kind of just talks about everything. It's kind of a background, and it's basically a letter from me to the board. I think it starts on page 3 and then goes to, I don't know, page 7. So, you know, it's what, 4 or 5 pages. And it just kind of talks briefly of the things that are in the budget, things that, you know, where we've been, what we've done, and where we're headed. And then, of course, there's, you know, strategic plan information that's in there. There's the org charts, and there's all those kind of things. And a lot of that stuff stays the same year to year. It's not new. But like what I don't want to create a big document just to create a big document, right? I want to create a document. My desire has always been that we would get to the point that we would do what's known as a CAFR, a comprehensive financial report, every year. I would love to be able to do that. But the one report that I really want to do is what they call a PAFR, a public financial report. And that document might be as simple as like a 5 or 10 page document that's, you know, front and back, nice looking document, color, that just tells the story of what happened from the prior year so everybody knows what went on. I could actually see the budget document being something very similar. If somebody wants to see every line item, we're always going to have that, right? Because there's no way I can build my budgets for my departments without having this level of work being done to know what it's there. But I'm thinking, like, what would be the main things that people need to see, need to know, that would tell the story that needs to be told so that they understand, one, what's happened, what's the economic impact within the community. And, you know, even if we're not doing a tax increase, why we don't need to do a tax increase. If we are proposing a tax increase, why we're proposing the tax increase. Let me just give you an example. I already know going into 2027, one of the biggest impacts we're going to have is that several of our large property owners have went in for reassessments, actually several years ago. And they were just decided, one of them was just decided this year. And one of them was for a very substantial amount. SAP went in and they came back out, and I forget the exact numbers on their reassessment, but I know the exact number, pretty close to it, of what the tax impact was. The tax impact for us, for the township, was $196,000 per year. So when we go into 2027, before I look at anything with, increased contract cost, increased, cost more to have a telephone, cost more for whatever, we're going to start 2027 with a negative $196,000 before we ever get started. And actually that number is probably closer to 250 when I add in the other property owners that I know have also done the same thing. And so we're going to start the year with that. And just to give you an idea, that's about 3% of, and I haven't drawn the exact numbers, but that's just about 3% of what I would, actually over 3% of what I would anticipate based on what we brought in, what we budgeted for this year. So, and that's just one, area. I haven't, we have a police contract that's got set amounts. We have other things like that that are all part of that before we ever get started. So, and, and we've, as a community, we try to keep it, we're pretty tight on our expenses. We don't have a lot of excess. Like, I don't get down to the end of the year and go, oh, everybody go spend your budgets. It's typically everybody's asking me, like, we've held really tight, but I still have this and this that has to be done, and I'm going to actually be over budget or something like that. And we have to talk about what that looks like. So that's the real challenge. I mean, just this year alone, our salt budget was drastically hit. Just was a tough year for salt. I don't know if you remember that, back in February, none of the communities were getting salt. And, when, in order for us to get salt at one point, we actually had to pay more than our contract price. And so, we had some challenges. Plus we were using, even though we were trying not to use as much, we were still using quite a bit just because of the weather and things like that. So those are kind of challenges that we've had, that every year, it's like, what do you really budget for in salt? What you could be on your worst year? Or do you just say, kind of, here's where our average is, and that's what we're going to budget. And then when you have a year like this year, you're over. And when you have a year like, I think it was 3 years ago, we hardly used any salt. And in fact, we actually had to buy salt at the end of the year to fulfill our contract requirements and put it in the shed. So, we started that year off, the next year off with more salt than we would normally start, so that's one of those challenges that we sometimes have. We have that same problem sometimes with diesel fuel because we use diesel trucks to do most of our salting and things like that during the winter. And if we don't have a lot, if we're not out a lot, then we don't use as much diesel fuel, which is obviously a good thing. But I have a contract that says I have to use X number of gallons to get it at that price. And I don't have an endless storage tank in the back that I can just store it. So I think we've got a 500-gallon tank. So when sometimes we end up having to buy fuel that we can't use. And so that's the challenge. So we have to figure that out. We try to keep that, we try to budget that as close as we can, and we try to bid it as close as we can. And sometimes that's a problem.
Why was a tax rebate so large? Like, I get Campus Boulevard with the vacancies, but why was SAP granted such a large reduction?
So a couple things I think that drove that. One is, if you recall, if you know anything about SAP's lot, they actually have 2 buildings over there. And one of their 2 buildings sits 100% empty. And so, so they have shrunk their manpower down partly because, during COVID, everybody worked from home. Or a lot of, I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people work from home. They started demanding some folks come back to the office. My understanding is folks retired and said, I'm not doing that, and some things like that. So they had some attrition. And then, I think they've also looked at saying, maybe here's not the key place for them for everybody. I know that they have people in Texas and they have people in New York. I think there's several things that had that, but one of the big things and the building that they do use is not full. It's not completely full. And so it's based on the revenue they're generating based on the space they have when they go into the county level. Yeah, and then you have the Campus Boulevard folks who have done the same thing.
Sure.
And and there's some other buildings that are sitting literally empty right now. And so that's a challenge. That's why the board has been pretty active in trying to come up with what are alternatives that could be in some of these office areas that would allow us to have some revenue and not have buildings sitting empty for years and years. And particularly what we don't want is buildings to be neglected. If they sit empty, that's one thing, but when they become neglected, then they become a challenge for the community for other reasons.
I have a bunch of questions.
Yeah, great.
I'm just going to ask them all so that you can kind of think about. It feels like the ask of the board is for us to think about what the public may want to see.
Yeah.
So some of my questions are like what format these are in. Is it a lot of time to produce these? Is there a format that might be easier that we could use that exists? Like, I think this is PowerPoint. So it's just a lot of redoing of Excel and so forth. Like, what's the most productive way to do it and efficient, especially given your limited financial department resources?
Yep.
You talk about telling a story. So like, I'm a nerdy accountant. So telling a story to me is numbers.
Yep.
But I'm obviously in the minority, right? So
Yep.
most people, and I'm asking from your experience, want the word story. They want to be told like a story, not this story. So you need the number story to create the word story, right?
And I think we have to do both because, as you say, you're kind of that nerdy accountant type. And, as I'm a numbers guy, like give me a spreadsheet and I'm like, okay, now I can see exactly what's happening. You give me all the words and I may or may not know what's happening, depending on how it's written. And so I think we have to do both, to be honest with you. I don't think we can go one exclusive of the other. But I think there's probably a balance. So one of the things that I would say is, looking at this, you can see real quick.
Yeah, just one more question in the pile of questions. Like, what is required?
Yeah.
Like there's something we want to do for the people and the transparency to the township, but what is the state or local requirement?
Typically I have to have something like this for the state, which is the line item type budget. And we will, we'll produce that one way or the other. I may not produce it in this format. I may produce it more in a spreadsheet format if I'm just submitting it to the state and we're not submitting it to the public. For example, though, when you look at some of the pages here, there's like one line of numbers.
Yeah.
Because that's the only thing that it's under operating expense, but in the streetlight fund, or streetlight department, I don't have salaries and wages and all of those kind of things. All I have is operating expenses, right? And so I did that just so that everybody sees when you look at every page, you can go, oh, there's only thing here is operating. We're not spending manpower on here. But maybe we don't need to do that. Maybe just the line item by itself is okay, and, communicates it, or maybe we say, it's really okay just to say streetlight, here's, in that streetlight fund, here's our revenue and here's our expenses. We don't even need the detail other than that because it really is small. It's less than $200,000, And so that's the kind of thing that I'm looking at. I'm hoping that you can put back to me as to like what's important and what's not in that way. But I think what you said is very important is, do we tell the story better with the numbers, or do we tell the story better with the words? Do we tell the story better with graphs? You know, is there a chart that maybe tells the story better? And that's what we should use. You know, some in here, if you'll, you know, when you look in this one, there were definitely some more graphs as part of it, particularly comparing, you know, this type of revenue to another type of revenue. And sometimes that speaks out really quickly. Or if you look at, you know, how much of the budget is of your property taxes goes to the school district versus how much goes to the township versus how much goes to the county. And this is different today than it was when we did this back in 2021. You know, at that time, it was almost 70% was to the school district, and then about it was split about 50-50 for the county taxes. Today, county taxes are about twice ours, you know, and I think the school districts are 6 times ours, to give an idea. And so there's a little bit different breakdown today and where that is. And so, you know, do those type of charts, are they a better way of telling some of the story? Is it important to tell that story? You know, when we say we're doing a 8% increase, people look at a tax bill of, let's say your tax bill is $10,000 for the year. And if 7 or 6,000 of that's to the school district, and another about 3,000 goes to the county and 1,000 goes to us roughly, or something like, 1,500 to us and whatever, then it's like 8% on that 1,500 is a pretty small number compared to 8% on the total school district piece, or the total level of taxes, you know. And so not that 8% is not a big number, but in comparison to the total picture, it's pretty small of what it could be. And so we just want to be clear with that. Is it important for people to understand how it relates to other municipalities around us, or don't people care? And I just care what happens to me. I don't care what's going on in, you know, Marple, Radnor, or you know, Chichester or wherever. I just care what's happening here. And so there's lots of parts of that story. Could we tell, or should we tell? You know, and the other thing is, it really is hard to do a comparison from us to somebody else without looking at everything. You know, last year I was looking at our tax rate, and our tax rate's fairly low for a municipality that has a full-time police department. It's one of the lowest. And what's interesting is I went over and I looked at folks like Radnor, just to say, because a lot of people say we should do things like Radnor. And I'm like, okay, if you give me Radnor's revenues, I will do things like Radnor, because Radnor happens to be a community that was, back in the 90s, they had basically it's a business privilege tax. And so it was a tax on businesses' revenues. And so they actually have about, I think it's close to $15 million a year that they get from that. We don't have that tax. And in the 90s, the state said, if you don't have this tax, you can't implement it. And so we can't even implement that tax. And so they have a whole set of revenue that we don't even, I mean, their tax from that is greater than our property taxes in what they bring in. So it's just an example of, like, I can't do an apples to apples comparison, because almost every community has something different that they do it differently. That's why I typically don't try to compare us to anybody else. I try to stay focused on what we are, and what I'd rather compare us to what we've been doing and where we're headed, then try to figure out how do we compare to our next door neighbor, whether it's Radnor or Edgemont. Edgemont doesn't even have a police force. They don't even have a public works team, so how do I compare them to what we do? They do third party for those kind of things. So
Are we permitted to informally poll our neighbors, friends and neighbors to say, what would you like to see? How would you like to see it? Like, what's the
Absolutely.
story that makes the most sense to you?
yeah, look, whatever way makes sense to you to help me figure out the right way to do this going forward. What I will say is this, obviously, somebody may come back and say, I want to see it like this, and I may look at it and go, I just can't produce that. It may be great, but can we get something close to that? I don't want to make, if I can figure out how to take the line item budget and stick it into a Excel sheet or a other type of, maybe it's even in AI, and say, give me this with this information, then that's what I would do. And if I can do that and give a better way to present what we're doing, then I'm happy to do that. Like, that's what I'm kind of looking at. And it may be a lot of work in 2026 that if we, that going forward in 2027 to 2028, 2029, all I'm doing is tweaking it. I'm not having, maybe I'm not having to build, I may not have to build the whole new boat. I'm just, we're just tweaking it a little bit. But what I want is, when I first came to Newtown, and I don't know whether I take this as most people aren't worried about where we are financially today, and they were when I first came, or what. But when I first came, I would have a budget meeting and I would have 70, 80 people show. And I loved it, because that meant 70 or 80 people of our community were hearing what we were doing. I've had budget committee meetings. I didn't have, or public budget meeting. I didn't do one last year, but prior years, it's just right before this, 2, 3 people would show. And I'll do it for 2 or 3 people. I'm happy for anybody to learn and spend the time with them. But 2 or 3 people is not going to communicate what we need to communicate to the public. And so how can we get this out in front of the most people possible? What would be the best way to get that data so that people understand what their taxes are going to? And I think if most people understood exactly what their township taxes were doing, most people would say, you do all that with what I give you. And because it is amazing when you think about the support that, what we pay for a police department, what we pay for public works, if I start going through all of those things and I share with you what that is and what we get out of those dollars, it's pretty amazing. It's just phenomenal when, there's 50 plus miles of roadway in this township that we have to maintain. And so, we're spending a lot of money every year on those kind of things.
So both of these documents are produced and take extra effort, right?
Say
They're
that.
produced, like this is not what spits out of the system. Somebody's taking time to
Oh,
prepare and
yes,
produce these.
yes.
I personally would find it helpful, maybe it doesn't matter what year, but to see what the system, like what doesn't take time to produce, like what spits out,
Here's what I will tell you, what spits out. You take this document and you look at it with just a bunch of lines going right down the page. And I'll get it for you. I'll send it to you. I was going to print it out. The problem is we're having trouble with that report right now. And it's just not printing correctly, but I'll print it out and send it to you all. In electronic format, just so you can kind of see it. And if you want a hard copy, I'll give it to you.
We're really trying to go from that to
Something else.
Something else.
Exactly.
So like me personally, I to see the starting line would help me get to the proposed finish line.
Yep.
Everybody like Pennyworth. So obviously, it's just the two of us tonight. You mentioned that there's other people that have volunteered that might be able to join us.
Yeah.
Um,
So I know some folks have said they would maybe be willing to work on that. They
Okay.
just didn't want to be on the committee. So there's that, and then there's, I'm happy to meet with you outside of here as well. Just to kind of keep that process moving. So we have to have a formal meeting until we're really ready to present something back to this group to say, here's where we should go.
Steve, I think I asked you this once before, but, and I believe it was about 10 years ago. And it was regarding the Ellis Preserve build out.
Yeah.
And there was a public meeting and there were a lot of people here, 50, 60.
Yeah.
And you explained revenue coming in because you were getting questions like, with all the money you're getting from Ellis Preserve, our taxes should never go up again ever.
Yeah.
And you laid out exactly what was coming in and what our new expenses were. Do you still have that presentation anywhere?
I can look back.
Do you know what I'm referring to?
I know the one because Rich and I worked on it like for about 3 years in a row. We did that every year. Every
Oh.
year we took what was new because people were saying, one of the comments was, you have all this new revenue. And, I said, yeah, we do. What number do you want to see? And somebody said, well, I want to see exactly how much revenue it was. And I want to say, like Lister at the time, we were adding, let's say about 100 homes a year in Lister, somewhere between 70 and 100 homes a year. And, everybody was saying, oh, you should be just, that's millions and millions of dollars. And I came back and said, actually, it ended up being about, I think it ended up being about $100,000 was what we actually ended up between 70 and $100,000 was the increase that year. And then I went back and I said, we made a commitment to add 1 police officer per shift. That means we had to hire 4. So in order to have 1, we have to hire 4 because they're 24 hours. And somebody said, I never thought about that. If you want to always have 4 officers on duty when we're working, when to cover the township. And if you think 4 officers over 10 square miles and, 15,000 people, it doesn't, all of a sudden, that doesn't seem like a lot. It sounds like a lot. But, we have a 22 officer police force, but 16 of those are patrol folks. And then the others, you have a police chief, a captain. We have a person for, we have a person for, the school resource officer. We have a traffic person, we have 2 detectives, but that's it. There's not a lot of extras there, and that's what we have. But adding 1 police officer at the time was about $125,000. So we picked up $100,000 this year, but I spent $125,000 by adding 1 police officer, and we did that over 4 years. So even though we picked up,
500,000.
so it was 500,000, and so it took us basically at that point, it was taking us about 5 years to recover though. So,
And then the new money coming in, Lister.
I paying a new police officer, and
Yeah.
So every year when we added another 100 homes, roughly, I picked up another $100,000, and that was what we were doing. That's a very simplified version of what we did. We went through and actually gave actual dollars.
I thought it was very helpful.
Yeah, and I can do that again.
No, I'm just thinking that as part of this
Yeah,
process would be
yep,
helpful.
Like what you're thinking maybe is like the progression of new, if we have a tax increase, people are gonna say, oh, we had all this new development, where did all that money go? Is that what you're thinking?
Yep.
Might arise once again?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
I just want to make sure I heard you.
yeah. We kind of went back and did that, but I can try to put something else together like that again.
Even if you just have that old format
Yep,
to look at.
yep. What other questions do you have?
Know that I have any questions, but it's this, we're actually talking about adding marketing talking to both our strategic plan and what we're doing about it.
Yeah,
So I think that's a good timing with what's happening with the planning that's going on, but it's a different way to think about how we talk about our work.
yep,
And it is a big marketing. We have to decide what the messages are. What do we want to convey?
yep.
And those become our metrics by which we evaluate success.
Yep. Unless you guys have more questions. We have a little bit of time. That
Yeah.
next meeting's not till 7.
So that was our new business. We don't have any old business. We don't have public, for this meeting, public comment. Anything else? Okay,
Motion to adjourn?
yep, 6:31.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thanks, Steve.
You're welcome.